Okay, we're live, and it is so great to be here with you all. We have an amazing show. We have some of the top experts in the country on audits, and that is the topic of the evening. I am Lulu Freistadt. I am the Executive Director of Smart Elections, and our mission statement is elevating election reform to an urgent national priority, which it needs to be. Our elections are in disrepair, if you haven't noticed, and we are here collectively to come together to try to repair them and create a democracy that is inclusive and accurate and works for everybody. So I'm so glad that you're here with us tonight. We have some really great stuff for you, and I'm just going to get started right away. So the first thing that I want to talk about tonight is some photographs that appeared on Twitter this week from the book Rage by Bob Woodward, and I have to say it was incredible what is in these 2 pages. So I'm going to share my screen and read them with you because this is something for us to really be aware of. This is real, this is happening, and we all need to know about it. So these were the 2 pages. They're page 116 and 117 from the book Rage, as I said, by Bob Woodward. And I'm going to see if I can just blow this up a little bit larger. These are on my Twitter account. So if you want to just scroll back through my Twitter account, you can also find them. But I'm going to read this section. So Trump is getting a briefing from his intelligence staff, and it says the NSA and CIA had evidence, highly classified, that the Russians had placed malware in the election registration system in at least 2 counties in Florida, St. Lucie County and Washington. And then we're on to page 117. There was no evidence yet that the malware had been activated. It was sitting there to be used. The voting system vendor used by Florida was used by state election registrations systems all over the country. The Russian malware was sophisticated and could be activated in counties with particular demographics. For instance, in areas with higher percentages of Black residents, the malware could erase every 10th vote, almost certainly reducing the total vote count for Democrats. The same could potentially be activated to reduce Trump votes in Republican districts. The bottom line, the Russians are here. And then what's actually even, this is very disturbing. And then it goes on to say that Trump says, you know, go ahead and go public at the end. Go public, Dan, take that to the press corps here in the White House. He wanted it done right away. That's great. But the one thing that he tells them not to do is not to tell them about the malware. And this is just so disturbing. The intelligence community, our elected officials, they know about this stuff. They know what's going on, and they are not telling us. This did not get public about this malware that could erase every 10th vote. And this is exactly the type of malware that we have been talking about on this program over and over again. Last time we had Benny Smith on. He is an election commissioner in Shelby County, Tennessee, and also a computer expert, a programmer. And he showed us malware that could do exactly something like this. The malware that he showed us can be programmed to give any candidate any percentage that they want. And he activated it in a matter of seconds just by using a flash drive on the system that he was on. So we know this exists. And now what we know is that our election officials or what we know is that the intelligence community and our elected officials also know that it exists, and they are not telling us about it. So what would that look like if we had malware on a computer, a computerized voting system that was counting the results, and then we did an audit of those results? What would that look like? Well, what it would look like is that the hand count audit would not match the machine count. And then the question is, have we actually seen that happen in any circumstances? And the answer is yes, we have. We have seen hand counts that don't match machine counts. And I am actually going to show you a video from the first documentary that I made. And this is this has been going on for years now. This is one of the things that's so frustrating about it. So I released this documentary in 2008, and this particular scene I'm going to show you is from 2004. And it is about the 2004 presidential count in Ohio. And you will see that the Green Party did, I have to stop sharing that screen. You'll see that the Green Party did a recount there. And I want you to watch this.
Are the elections being rigged?
Yes, our evidence shows that they are.
Evidence like the 2004 presidential recount results in Ohio. Jesse Tendler was a regional coordinator for that recount.
I was in charge of about 10 different counties. Not only was there discrepancy between the hand recount and the original certified vote, in most cases, there was also a discrepancy between the hand recount and the machine recount in every precinct in every county.
That's a little confusing, so let's look at it carefully. In almost every precinct he was involved in, there was a difference between the hand count and the machine count. Here are some of the differences. In Bradford Village, the official certified machine count had 3 votes more than the hand count. In Piqua 2A, the machine count had 8 votes more. Troy 3E, 14 votes more. The machine seems to be adding a small number of votes each time, but could those small changes really have mattered?
The differences are absolutely meaningful differences. Difference of 6 votes per precinct could change the results of the entire election.
Pretty stunning, huh? So that is what it looks like when the machine count doesn't match the hand count. And that is something that we should all have a lot of concern about. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to bring Virginia Martin on. She is an election commissioner who is an expert, a nationally recognized expert in hand counts. And the reason why she is nationally recognized is because she did them in Columbia County, New York for 10 years. So Virginia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Lulu. Glad to be here.
And I want you to just tell us a little bit about your background and just briefly what you did in Columbia County and why you decided to do that.
Right. And I should say I'm no longer commissioner. I was until early this year, but I was commissioner for 11 years. And for 10 of those years, New York State had optical scanners. And during all that entire time that we had optical scanners, in my county, we did a full hand count, a full 100%, well, originally a full 100% hand count, and then worked it down to sort of a modified hand count of that was very, very robust of many of the ballots. So we were, it was sort of extraordinary that we were doing that.
And there was a lot of resistance. I remember you telling me that you didn't get support from, this is in New York State, you didn't get support from the state Board of Elections.
No, we didn't really get support from the state. They allowed us to do it because what we were doing was complying with the law. When New York State instituted optical scanners in 2010, they implemented as well an audit provision that required all counties to audit 3% of the machines that were deployed, every single vote cast on 3% of the machines deployed. And my counterpart and I were not happy with that. So we said, well, we want to do more than that.
So I just want to break this down for people because it gets a little bit confusing and people are like audits and 3% and hand counts. And I think people's eyes glaze over after a while. So I just want to be really, and every state is different. You're going to hear about kind of 3 different categories of audits tonight. So what we're talking about with Virginia Martin is what she did, which was close to a full hand count audit. And if they had any problems, any concerns, then I know that you would do a full hand count. And that was of contested races. So if there's somebody who's running on the ballot and no one's running against them, you don't count those ballots 100% by hand.
That's correct. Unless the statute requires us to, right?
Right. Okay. So what we're talking about in this particular instance is what circumstances is it useful to do a hand count audit? And what does that mean? What is a hand count audit? So the thing that we are aware of now, because we just saw a situation where the machine count didn't match the hand count, and we know that we have possibly malware running on our voting machines. So you want to say, well, what could we do about it? Well, the number one thing that we can do about it is to hand count ballots, like take ballots and look at them with our eyes, those of us who are sighted, and compare those to machine results. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Sometimes there's software and risk limiting audits. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk to Ray Lutz, who's developed another software system to help us do that. But what Virginia did in her county was a very kind of simple, old-fashioned solution. Was they would count most of the ballots by hand in public, and then show them to, and let people watch that. And so I'm actually going to take you off screen for a second, and I'm going to show people a video of what that looks like, and then pull you right back on. So we'll be right back with you. And this is basically what it looks like when you do a hand count audit. This, again, is from that documentary that I made, my first documentary. And it is, you'll see Brad Friedman. He is someone that has been covering elections for quite a while, and he starts us off to explain this.
In optical scan, you have a piece of paper where you fill in the oval, similar to your SAT test. There's still concerns about optical scan systems. We've seen them hacked down in Leon County, Florida, and we've seen errors with optical scan systems. In the 2006 primary up in Pottawatomie County, Iowa, you could flip the results of like 9 elections.
The electronic machines made by ES&S had miscounted every race on the ballot.
The 10% sample doesn't give you much confidence.
It doesn't give me much confidence. It may give someone that's really hot with statistics confidence. We want every single vote counted, and counted accurately the first time.
If what people really trust are the hand counts, why don't we just do the hand counts in the first place?
Sounds fine by me. And most of the countries around the world do exactly that.
In New Hampshire, it is in 45% of our towns.
I'm Dennis Makarovich. We're in the Wilton Town Hall building. It's a hand count town, paper ballots. There'd be 4 people sitting opposite each other. I'm one of them. I would look at the ballot and I would read it. This person is watching me read it, verifying that that's what I said. Then the person over here has a tally sheet and puts a check mark. The other person sitting there is observing that that person put the check mark in the right place.
So there's 4 people
4
making
people
sure
per ballot.
that each vote is counted correctly.
Yes.
Do you have a hard time getting those people?
No. People want to do it.
There are problems with hand-counted elections, just as there are problems with electronically counted elections. What's ultimately important is that whichever process you do, it be open, it be observable, and people have faith in the results that you get.
In optical
So that process where you have 4 people looking at each ballot, is that the process that you were doing in Columbia County, New York?
Exactly. Yes. It was great. And it was very public. It was very open. Anybody could come in and watch. We didn't have a lot of people coming in, but we did have some, and they were very welcome.
Anybody who wanted to could come in and watch.
Anybody. Yeah.
Right. That's one of the key things when we talk about audits and figuring out whether or not results are accurate. Transparency is one of the #1 things to boost confidence. And I didn't have a chance to download these. Virginia sent me a bunch of letters and that people had written saying how much confidence they had and how great it made them feel to watch these hand counts in Columbia County. But do you want to just share a little of the feedback that you would get from the community from those hand counts that you did?
Sure, especially people that were new to the election process, people who had never been candidates before came and they watched our audit, and some of them were they were all kind of astounded by it. Some of them were fascinated by it and sat there and watched and watched and watched, and they just loved it. They ate it up, and they told me how much they appreciated it and how it made them feel like democracy was at work. And it was fantastic watching Democrats and Republicans working together toward a common end and it being very, very open. And then other people came in and they watched for a little while and they quickly got bored. They damn straight.
Right. It can be sort of like watching paint dry, but for whether or not, you're an election geek or not. So, and I think one of the other things that's always stuck with me is that you've told me that you've had conversations with candidates who lost, who said to you, I am very, very sure now that I really lost. I don't have any question about it. And is that something that you would get?
That is true. That did happen. And, isn't that what we really need to do? I mean, the whole point of elections is, I think, to put up legitimate candidates, to give the people a choice, to count their votes accurately, to certify accurate numbers, and to make it clear to the losers that they really lost.
Right. And then the public has confidence that the people who are running our government have the actual mandate. Now, Columbia County is a relatively small county. There's about 50,000 active voters.
Yeah, about 40. Yeah, close.
40,000. Okay. And then you and I actually looked at some numbers yesterday. And I just want to talk about those briefly. So I know that there was one race that you showed me paperwork for that was the 2016 presidential election. And in that race, you counted about 70% of the ballots by hand. Is that correct?
Yeah, 75% of the machine cast ballots by hand. We also have a lot of absentee ballots in our county, always have. We'll have many more this time, but we always had a lot. So this was 75% of the machine cast ballots we counted by hand.
So the absentee ballots you were already counting by hand.
Yeah, we counted them entirely by hand.
Right. Okay. So this was 75% of the machine cast ballots that in that particular, this was an example in 2016. Now, and did you have any issues? Did the machine count match the hand count?
Basically, it matched. There might have been a couple of votes where hand counters were able to discern a vote that was really a vote that the machine wouldn't have counted, and appropriately so, would not have counted. And when that was the case, we made a ruling, Democrat and Republican together, and we typically counted that vote. So there were, a few little cases where the count changed, but we did not find that the machines made any mistakes.
Right. And now one of the things that we have to be aware of is that audits have a preventative
They sure do.
Quality to them. If somebody wants to mess around with election results, they're not going to mess around in a county like Columbia County where you are counting so many ballots by hand because they know they're going to get caught. So in the years that you did these hand counts, for the most part, did the machine count match the hand count?
Yes, really did.
Great. And that's what we want. We want to see that.
There were only very small differences, and it never changed an election.
Right. And then people a lot of times will say, well, hand counts are so complicated and they're so stressful and we can't do them. And there's so much anxiety and stress. So one of the things that I love that you tell me about this is that it wasn't easy in the beginning, but that it got easier as you did it. And you developed paperwork and protocols and systems that made that easier for you. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Anytime you start anything new, it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. That's true for election administrators as well as anything else in the world that you do. So the first time it was a little bit hard. It was particularly hard for us in Columbia County because we were doing way more counting than any other county in the state. But we developed processes, like you said. We developed ways to make sure that we were catching any initial hand count errors, and there will be hand count errors, but there are ways to figure out where they are quickly and correct them quickly. And so we developed paperwork. We determined who really wanted to be counters, who was adept at it. And a lot of people really loved doing it. I mean, it became sort of a social thing for them. It became patriotic, their civic participation.
Did you ever have trouble getting people to do those jobs? Because I know you would have to hire some extra people each election cycle.
Right. I would say no, not really. I mean, from time to time, we had a little schedule snafu or something like that. But generally, we didn't have a problem finding people. People were happy to do it. They were happy to make the extra money. And they were doing a great job at it. I mean, we just loved having them.
Did you, for the most part, have trouble getting those results in on time and certifying on time, even though you were doing the hand counts?
No, but I will say New York State allows 25 days after the election to certify. So we had a longer window.
Okay, so that's one thing. If people want to do hand counts, they need to be aware that I think how many on that 2016 presidential election that you told me where you did 75% of the ballots by hand, how long did that take you to do?
Well, you have to figure out how many races we were doing. We were counting the presidential race, we were counting our congressional race, and we were counting maybe 6 or 8 other races that we felt were appropriate to count. And it took us about a day and a half to organize all the materials, including all the ballots, so that they could be hand counted, because you have to put them in order so that people can use them without having to flip everything upside down all the time. And then, so that took about a day and a half for the entire county. And then it took about 5 days for us to count 75% of our machine ballots.
And it was about 20,000 ballots. Is that about how many?
Yeah, it was around 21,000 ballots, something like that.
Right. So that's about 5 days for 20,000 ballots. So you hear this over and over again from people that it's just going to take forever if we count all the ballots by hand. And that was not, in fact, your experience. Your experience was that after doing it a few times, you were able to do it efficiently, certainly within the period of time allotted for certification. And in this case, it was less than a week.
Yeah. And, in our case, we'd been doing it so many times for so many years that we were really good at it. So we had a great process. And I will say that if ever there was a national spotlight on us, and we had to hand count a race, in public with, media and the spotlight on us, it would be, a day in the park. It's what we do. We do it all the time.
Right. But what happens so often is counties aren't doing hand counts. And so the first time that they're forced to do a hand count because the race is slow or they have to, there's a recount, because the race is tight or or the judge orders a recount, then all of a sudden they're doing a hand count under very stressful circumstances with a lot of scrutiny, and it can become an extremely stressful situation. So one of the things that I've heard people say is that hand counts are very expensive. And then you have a figure for your annual budget, approximately what it cost you of your annual budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had an annual budget of about, roughly $650,000 for our entire Board of Elections for 2016. And I computed that that particular hand count audit cost about 1.5% of our annual budget.
Right. So really a minimal cost to give people complete confidence in the results.
What are we there for, if not to give complete confidence in the results? Right.
And this is something that I'm hoping that Smart Elections can work on with you, is creating a manual to teach people some of the protocols that you developed there in Columbia County. These are things that other counties across the country could be undertaking if they were interested in, right?
Yes. Yeah. And, I have to back up and say all counties in New York State do some hand counting. They don't do as much as we do, but they do some hand counting. So they're accustomed to it as well.
I want to explain this a little bit because it is complicated. Every state, for the most part, has different auditing laws and procedures. Some states don't really do any audits at all. There's a National Election Defense Coalition has an estimate that less than 25% of the states are actually doing meaningful audits. And I actually think it might be even less than that. Because, it's all in the detail. Are these audits being done before certification? Are these audits being drawn randomly, as opposed to if people know ahead of time which races are going to be audited, then it's very easy to avoid those races. And, if you decide to rig other races. So there's all kinds of details in audits that make a big difference about whether or not they're meaningful. So in New York, there is a law. They have to do 3% of the machines. They have to do a hand count. I've actually gone and watched some of those hand counts. I know they're different everywhere. The ones that I saw in Brooklyn, unfortunately, were not confidence inspiring. There wasn't really, there wasn't oversight the way where you said you had 4 people watching each ballot. This would be like one guy sort of at a table and just like counting out 50 ballots as fast as he could, and then counting out another 50 ballots as fast as he could. And they would do this sort of sort and stack. And I also was concerned that they knew the results ahead of time. So they knew kind of what they were supposed to be matching with. So I think that you're right that there is a law here in New York that 3% of the machine count is audited. I think that we need to do a lot better. And I think that if one of the things, if counties across the country could be doing the hand counts, we would have a baseline to compare to machine counts all over the country.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we necessarily need any extra laws to undertake. You didn't need any extra laws to do these hand counts, did you?
I didn't, because what we were doing was complying with the law and then some. We were just doing more.
So if, you know, a member of a community went to their election officials and said, you know, I'm really nervous about the results in 2020. I really am concerned that the machines might not be accurate. Could you, our county election officials or our town election officials, do a hand count audit for us? Is that something that election officials might be able to undertake?
I'm guessing yes. I mean, the only state I know about is New York State. Since we do it in New York State, I'm guessing yes. Now, remember, if you get one commissioner to say, yes, I like that idea, that commissioner's also got to get his counterpart to agree as well. And that may be hard.
Right. You've got to get the whole board of elections to sign up on it.
Everything in a board of elections is typically hard.
Right. But pressure from the public to do this kind of public auditing certainly would go a long way.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And it's really a pleasure to have you. So we're going to do just some quick station identification breaks here. I want just you to know how to get in touch with us. If you need to get in touch with us, we are Smart Elections, and we do focus on election reform and election protection in particular. And this is our website. We're at smartelections.us. And we are on Twitter. That is @smart_elections. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Lulu Freistat. We have a YouTube channel, and we would love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and look for Smart Elections. And we are also on Facebook, and we are also now on TikTok and Instagram. Just this week, I put our first videos up on TikTok. So woo, we're on TikTok. So go look for us there and like our videos on TikTok. One of the things that would be really great is if you could support us financially. The work that we do does cost. And the more, if we could raise money, we could do more things. For example, that project that I would like to undertake to get Virginia to write a manual of her, of the procedures that they developed for hand count, for public hand count audits. If we could fund that, then we could get that to counties across the country. So that would be a great reason to become a tax deductible monthly subscriber. And in order to do that, just go to our website and look for donate. And we're recommending $5 a month. It's not very much, just a little bit to help us along. We have had some good donations since we've been doing the forum. We actually had a $500 donation, and some other people have been stepping up and doing monthly donations. So whatever you can afford, we could really use your help. So thanks very much for that. And we'll throw all these links into the YouTube underneath. This video will be on YouTube if you want to watch it afterwards. And if you want to email us, you can email us at contact@smartelections.us. So that's our station identification. And now I am so delighted to bring our next guest on. It is such a pleasure to have her here. So this is Stephanie Stringer, and she is a consultant with Verified Voting. And she's going to talk to us about risk limiting audits. So risk limiting audits are like this buzzword right now. Everybody's like, oh, let's do some risk limiting audits. So let's just start out with like the basics, like what are they? Can you just sort of break it down and explain it to us?
Sure. Well, it would be great. So when you use computers to help count ballots, there are some advantages to that. One is that computers can count very fast, and computers are very good at checklists. They're very good at following instructions, whatever instructions they happen to have been given. So there are a lot of reasons that it's very appealing to use computers to help count ballots. But
I think also one of the things is size, and people really, this is a really important point. A lot of times I think kind of people who are very committed to hand marked paper ballots will say we can do them everywhere. And I know Virginia is very committed to the idea that we can do hand count audits everywhere. I think I misspoke there and said hand marked paper ballots, but I think we can do hand marked paper ballots everywhere. But the big thing, I think it comes down to size. Sometimes we have these huge jurisdictions. We have jurisdictions like New York, which is about 4.5 million active voters. I know LA is bigger than that. It might be 13 million active voters. Huge, huge jurisdiction. So when you have these huge jurisdictions, sometimes the idea of trying to count or audit everything by hand becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a large jurisdiction, even in Orange County, California, where I helped with a risk limiting audit a few years ago, in their warehouse, they had over 1 million pieces of paper, because not only do they have a lot of voters, a lot of their ballots had more than one piece of paper. So it's easy. I mean, and 1 million is a very, very big number. I mean, even imagining counting up to 1 million, it takes you a long time.
Yeah,
So,
and California
especially really is
California has a lot of referendums also.
Yep.
60, 70 referendums sometimes on one ballot. That's a lot of votes to count.
Yeah. So if you are in a situation where you can't, or even you just believe you can't, the election officials believe that they can't do hand counted, they can't hand count results.
Audit. Yeah.
It's useful to have to use statistics to build confidence, even if you can't build perfect confidence. Yeah. So a risk limiting audit is a way of looking not at every single ballot, but at enough that you can have good statistical confidence that if something had gone wrong, you would have caught it.
Right. And now we're gonna talk about 3 different kinds of risk limiting audits, and I'm gonna show a video now that's gonna show one type, and then we'll have you back to talk about with us a little bit more. Okay. So there's a lot of different types of risk limiting audits you can do. You can do the math a lot of different ways. This particular video was developed by the National Voting Rights Task Force. And I'm just going to play a part of it. I'm not going to play the whole thing. But the little section that this talks about one particular type of risk limiting audit.
With so much at stake in our world, it's important that we have elections we can trust. Unfortunately, computer programs can be hacked or sometimes get the count wrong by accident. So we need to routinely verify the machine count with humans. It's called a risk limiting audit, or RLA, and it's math. The risk limiting audit is like giving a DNA test to an election. An RLA gives us confidence that the reported tally declared the true winner. It works by statistical sampling. Instead of asking random voters how they voted in an exit poll, we ask a random sample of the ballots what votes they contain. This random sample gives us a micro picture of the entire contest. And here's where the math comes in. Instead of counting all the ballots, you count just the right amount of ballots that give us a statistically accurate picture of the final results. In this example, we take a random sample of all the ballots cast. The results show a relatively similar ratio of winning to losing votes. We have an RLA match, a random sample confirming the outcome. But suppose our random sample turns out to be very different from the reported totals. We have an RLA mismatch. This means we need to randomly sample a larger number of ballots and/or possibly move to a full hand count. Remember, a sufficient number of truly randomly sampled ballots will always give a trustworthy report of the election outcome. But if the contest is close with a small margin of victory, the RLA must randomly sample more ballots to have confidence in the outcome. In a close contest with a small margin of victory, an RLA requires a larger number of ballots polled to achieve confidence. An RLA is far superior to a conventional audit where a fixed percentage of precincts are examined. There, officials are not actually checking whether the election results are correct. They're just spot checking the accuracy of a few machines. Ultimately, efficiency is the major benefit of RLAs. Voters are getting statistically dependable results without checking large numbers of ballots. and elections are using fewer resources. With an RLA, we won't count more ballots than we need to or fewer than we need to. That means more elections can be audited, more outcomes can be verified, and election results can be trusted. Please visit our website for more information on RLAs.
So that's like a little tutorial there on one type of risk limiting audit. I think one of the things that's interesting there is they talk about how the risk limiting audit gives us more confidence than just doing like a 3% sample. And I think that's one of the most, like here in New York, legally we do the 3% of machines. Do you want to just talk about why the risk limiting audit is better than that?
Well, it's more efficient, and it. Well, I mean, one thing is that if only 3% of machines are going to be tested, if someone wants to mess with the results, they can just mess with a few machines.
There's a lot of other machines there that aren't being tested. There's a lot of ballots that aren't being counted. And one of the things that I've heard Philip talk about is how it's so important when you're doing a risk limiting audit that you're pulling these random ballots from the whole mix.
Yes. You need to have, you need to know where all the ballots were that were counted in the election, and practically at a board of elections, that can be harder than you might think, because there are all these little categories of ballots, like ballots that came in by mail but were crumpled up for whatever reason and are not flat enough to go through the scanner. So there are, it's not hard to miss a few ballots unless you're really careful about making sure that you're including all of them.
Right. And my understanding of really the heavy lifting of the risk limiting audit to a large extent is creating what they call the manifest, which is that orderly file system of every single ballot that you need if you're going to be able to pull all of these ballots. And that can be more work than actually pulling the ballots in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Board of Elections needs to, they need to be super organized about how they store ballots and knowing how many ballots are where. Election offices are generally really good at being really organized, but they're also really good at prioritizing the stuff that they need to do versus the stuff that would be good to do, because they're under a lot of pressure and they're underfunded.
Right. So I think that's one of the things that, that's one of the things that people don't realize when they're saying risk limiting audits are so efficient, they're so fast. There are a lot of steps involved in risk limiting audits and expense. You know, you have to hire people to create that organization, and often they're using software. So the software itself is in fact another potential problem that you have to be aware of, that you're not using the software in any way that can jeopardize the actual security of the risk limiting audit, right?
Yeah, and another major resource is the time between the end of the voting and the what's usually called certification, the finalization of results. That's a really compressed period, and there's a lot of stuff that has to happen in that time period. And to do a risk limiting audit before certification, which is when you want to do it,
absolutely,
you need to find time in there, and that's hard. And that depends on the timelines in the state. You know, Florida has very short timelines. Oregon has timelines. I'm in Oregon. It has timelines that are fine for small counties, but in large counties, it's compressed enough that it's hard for them to stick an extra audit in there.
And it's complicated and people need training. So often these risk limiting audits are starting with pilots. That tends to be how people get started, is with a pilot. And I know we've seen pilots in California, in Michigan. You want to list some of the other states?
Rhode Island, Virginia. I mean, there've been a ton. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Ohio, I think.
Right.
New Mexico for sure.
New Mexico has been doing what are similar to risk limiting audits for years, actually, and has one of the best systems. Colorado, Rhode Island, and New Mexico are the states that have actually passed legislation mandating the risk limiting audits at this point. And you have to have a certain type of voting system in place. You have to be using hand-marked paper ballots. For most voters, unless except for the voters with disabilities, you can't really do a risk limiting audit when you have. This is one of the things that the computer scientists like Philip Stark have been adamant about, is that if you have most of your ballots being produced by computers, a risk limiting audit doesn't do you any good because you don't know if the computer has actually produced an accurate ballot.
Right. I mean, the point of a risk limiting audit is to check every place that the computers were part of the process of tabulation. I mean, there's a whole other huge process that involves computers, that involves who gets registered to vote, who's on the rolls, who's admitted to the polls. That's a whole other very important piece of this. But the risk limiting audits are about the tabulation from the ballots that actually came in. Yeah, and if you don't have any ballot that is not marked by hand, any ballot that's marked, that is marked with a computer even, the problem is you don't know how good the voters are in practice at checking that what the computer did was what they wanted it to do.
We know they're not good. We know that studies that have done, most voters do not check a ballot that's printed by a computer. So there's a couple things when we're looking at risk limiting audits, there's a couple things that we need for the most part. We need most voters to vote with hand marked paper ballots, right?
Yeah.
So, so we're looking for most voters to use hand-marked paper ballots, and we're looking usually for a certain type of equipment. There are going to be types of systems where you're not going to be able to do a risk limiting audit because—
Well, you can always do a ballot polling audit. If you have the paper ballot, you can always do the ballot polling audit that was described in the little movie you showed. There are techniques that are actually more efficient than a ballot polling audit, and this is really important, more predictable for the election officials than a ballot polling audit. The most efficient kind is called a ballot comparison audit. And to do a ballot comparison audit, that depends on what the equipment is that is doing the computer equipment that's doing the tabulating.
So we're just going to dip into the weeds for a minute here, and then we're going to dip back out. But this is just to say that there's risk limiting audits are, it's a sort of overarching concept, and there's different types that you can do. And there's a lot of resources available at Verified Voting. This is one document that they've created, and it talks about the ballot polling audit was what we showed in the little video. You can also do risk limiting audits where you're literally comparing one ballot at a time to the machine results. And then there's also, you want to just briefly mention what the batch comparison is?
Well, it's sometimes the best you can do if you can't do a ballot level comparison audit because your voting, the tabulation equipment won't tell you how it interpreted each individual ballot. You can take whatever batch size, the equipment will tell you what its totals were. So often that's, people will, the employees will take 100 ballots at a time, put them through the scanner, and then there will be the system will note this batch had 60 votes for Lulu and 40 votes for Stephanie, and so when you have those kinds of totals, you can do an audit that checks enough of those totals to give you confidence in the election. Actually, Lulu, I found, can I share something?
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, and then we have to move on.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share for you some of the things that are available at Verified Voting. So I don't know if you can see that.
You have to share your screen. Let me see. I think I might have to put it into the stream. Here we go. Let me put this ad to the stream. Okay. Oh, no, that's Ray. Ray, we're not ready for you yet. Sorry, we'll be right with you. Was it there for a minute, Stephanie? Did you share your screen?
Yeah, I did
do that again?
I did something I shouldn't have done. There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
So just so this is at verified. Look at it's verifiedvoting.org audits. There are a ton of really great materials. So there's what Lulu just showed you here, which is the risk limiting audit methods if you really want to get in the weeds. But there's also more general stuff, just what is a risk limiting audit. And there is one of my favorites, which is the checking the paper record, which is a guide for if you want to go to your Board of Elections or some nearby Board of Elections and watch them do whatever audit they are doing. This gives you the tools you need to observe, to get started observing or to observe in great detail. And I have to say that of all the things that you can do to protect the election, observing either in the polling place or observing the counting of the absentee or mail-in ballots or observing the audits, get yourself into the Board of Elections and observe some stuff. It will make you such a much stronger advocate.
Absolutely. And then one of the things that is really important, not everybody can just wander in and observe an election. So generally speaking, if you want to observe either the counting of the absentee ballots or the actual count itself, if there is any type of audit in your community, you have to usually get associated with a candidate or a party. Sometimes you can associate with a third party, like that's what happened in Ohio. The Green Party did a lot of, they were the real impetus for a hand count there. Call up a candidate or, email them, go to their website and say, I want to observe the count for you. I want to be an official monitor. And then you will have the access that you need. And then you want to get in touch with organizations that are doing election protection, like Smart Elections. There's also the Election Protection Hotline, which is 1-866-VOTE. And if you are finding problems with that count, you want to alert the public, alert social media. You want to get that message out there as soon as possible. There are many, many deadlines that really affect these things. There's only a certain number of days after which election results can be challenged. There's only a certain number of days in which you can go to court. There's only a certain number of days in which a candidate can protest, things like that. So these are all really important things to get public if you have any concerns or to get additional support for this type of thing. And it looked to me like verified voting is being very active in terms of helping people with this type of work.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we're doing work inside boards of elections to support pilots and support, states like Rhode Island, and also producing a lot of materials to help people in various parts of the process, to help the public, to help election officials, to help advocates. So there's just a really rich trove of materials on the Verified Voting website. And there's also, if you haven't seen it before, the Verified Voting, it's called the Verifier, and it will just tell you what election equipment is in use where in the United States. And it's the only up-to-date comprehensive source that's available to the public.
It's an amazing resource. And we'll put some links to that up on our website at smartelections.us. So thank you so much for being here with us, Stephanie. It's a real pleasure to have you. And I hope that you'll come back. You're doing some other work that's very interesting that I want you to come back and talk to us about. Okay, so that's a little tease for that. Okay, thanks so much. So we're just going to move along here, and we are going to have some breakout sessions next week. I've talked to both Virginia and Ray, who's coming up next, who's going to talk to us about this amazing tool that he developed called Audit Engine. And Ray and Virginia are both going to do breakout sessions next week. So on Monday and I think either Thursday or Friday, we will have an hour-long breakout session to talk more about full hand count audits and about Ray's tool, Audit Engine. And if we can get someone to do risk limiting audits with us, then we will also do a breakout session on that. So those will be next week. And we will get the dates out to you shortly. So I'm going to bring Ray on now for a few minutes here. Ray, thank you so much for being with us. It's such a pleasure to have you here. You've done some amazing work, as all of our guests have. You're the executive director of Citizens Oversight Projects. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks.
Just tell us, great to have you. Tell us a little bit about your work there.
Well, we started it generally, we are encouraging the public to engage with their government and attend meetings and be involved, basically direct engagement versus just talking about it. So we, back in about 2006, started veering into the election integrity area. And right after we actually were fighting Blackwater, they had a recount to eject them from their new development, hand counted it, and we video recorded the whole thing, including all of the ballots going by. And I thought, you know, it would be great just to take a picture of every single ballot and review it later. And
what is Blackwater? I'm not sure what that reference is.
Blackwater Worldwide, they're the, you know, Eric Prince and the brother of Betsy DeVos, the current education secretary. It's a mercenary army company that was trying to set up shop here in San Diego County. And it was about a 1.5-year project, one of our first that we started as doing oversight, and it blew up like an atomic bomb in our face. Because we thought we were just going to do local stuff.
All right, I'm going to move you along because you did some stuff that's very related to elections that I really want to focus on. One of the things is that you sued San Diego County election officials because you did not feel that their audit was correct, and you won that lawsuit.
Right. Well, they were leaving out 285,000 ballots out of the audit. The law says that they're supposed to include the vote by mail ballots. Now, they didn't used to have very many vote by mail or absentee ballots early on, like in 1962. But then in the 90s, everybody started using it more. And toward about 2006, Deborah Bowen, the Secretary of State, says that all vote by mail should be included. 10 years later, they still weren't including them all. So we said, you need to include them. And they said, well, you're going to have to take us to court. And then we won. But then they worked with
so this is very interesting. So you won this lawsuit in San Diego saying you have to, because California had at that time a 1% mandatory audit law that at least 1% of the ballots had to be audited, correct?
Yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about, where every state is different. You have all these different audit laws on the books. So New York gets 3% of the machine count. California, it was 1%, but they weren't including their absentee ballots in their 1%. You won that lawsuit, and then California changed the law so that then the absentee ballots didn't have to be included, right?
Well, almost. The thing is here, we call them vote by mail ballots because anybody can vote by mail as much as they want. And about 2/3 of voters at that time were voting by mail. And the ones that came in and were processed by election day were included. And that is, most of them. But then the second, little bit less than half, were not included.
And so these were the late arriving absentee ballots. So this is just to say, we got to move along here. I'm sorry, because I really want to get to Audit Engine. I just want to set up your history as somebody who has done a lot of oversight of election officials successfully. You are one of the people in the country who has really observed audits and around the country and had people and teams in place and watched them. So what I understand is that you came out of that experience really pretty dubious about audits around the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the thing is, you have to remember about these audits, including the risk limiting audits that you just covered. These are actually done by the officials that did the election. They're auditing themselves.
This is such a great point. Nobody calls up the IRS and says, hey, will you come audit me, please? No, and the IRS doesn't let you audit yourself. But when we're doing audits around the country, election officials are auditing themselves. So it's so important that we move away from that to a professionally audited system.
Or we have to just give them a lot of oversight, which is what we've been working toward.
Exactly.
We need the public to go in and watch these audits very, very carefully. I don't really care much about whether it's a risk limiting audit or a regular audit. None of them are very good if you're not there watching them because they can fix the numbers.
So now what you did, because you were dubious about these audits, is you developed this tool called Audit Engine. And the first thing that I want to make sure that we get to, because this was fascinating, one of the things when you're getting these documents from election officials, one of the things that they will give you is called a cast vote record. And that cast vote record has a lot of information on it, including basically every vote that was counted and how it was counted by a machine. And Ray showed me when I went to one of his workshops how an election official, an insider working with these documents could very, very easily change the results quite quickly. Will you share your screen and just show us that, Ray? Because it's startling.
It should be shared if you just pull it into the viewer there.
Great.
Yeah, so there we go. This is called a cast vote record file, and this is from the leader in the country called ES&S, Election Systems and Software. It has what's called, they call it the cast vote record. This is like the ballot number. And then over here you have contests, and the contests go way over. There's many, many columns. There's 310 columns. And in this file, there's 999,999 rows. So it's almost 100,000 rows. That's how
what
big
you were
this file is.
showing us was how easily it is to copy and paste like a candidate's name into another candidate's vote.
So let me do that right now. Let me just show you this. So here we have Lisa Neubauer and Brian Hedgedorn, and all somebody has to do is just copy and paste over this and change it.
And these are the actual results that would be being changed, because these are where the results are going to be pulled from this document, right?
Well, this is the document that they provide to the public. There's background, databases and stuff that might make it harder, but from my point of view, I can't see any of that or prove that they haven't done it. And especially with vote by mail ballots that have no other record, they come in and this is all we get. So they could easily change this, and there is no way to check this except for what you just covered, which is an audit of some kind, either going all the way back to the paper or what we have provided here. And if you click over, and I'll show you the block diagram.
Okay, so now what we're going to get to here, Ray, because he's done so much work with audits and he's developed really a great deal of skepticism about audits being done around the country by election officials, which is basically election officials doing their own auditing. And we know, in fact, that some of those audits have been gamed. For example, we know that the audits in Cuyahoga County in Ohio were gamed. So Ray developed this thing that he calls Audit Engine. And what it is, you want to just tell us a little bit what it does, Ray?
Sure, of course. So if you will look at this upper box, this is the voting system flow where you have the voter over here. And that should be a pen, of course, not a pencil, but a paper ballot, hand-marked paper ballot we prefer. They put it through a scanner and they create ballot images. Now, almost all of the machines, I'm talking about more than 99%, do it this way, where they create a ballot image first, then they extract the vote to create basically a list of selections that you voted on. And that's in the cast vote record file that I just showed you. And that becomes the official results. Now, what we do is we get the ballot images, which is the earliest possible place that we can get a digital representation before the machine tries to look at those bubbles and try to guess, how you intended to mark it. And then we upload those, do style analysis to determine where the bubbles are. And then we do a vote extraction similar to what they do, creating our own cast vote records. And then we compare it with theirs down to the ballot. So unlike a risk limiting audit, which only selects a sample of the ballots and usually only covers one or two contests, they don't really ever explain this very well, but the risk limiting audits don't cover every contest when they do them.
It's very rare. Yeah, like in Colorado, for example, they're usually just picking, I think, 2 races, one county race and one statewide race right now. And they're and those races are not randomly selected. The Secretary of State is picking which races they want to audit. So again, when an election official is picking which races get audited, then they can pick the race that they don't want to audit because they're protecting a certain race. So that's why this is so amazing. This is something that you've developed that the public can just completely do on their own to audit elections, right?
It's not as simple as just a big green button, because unfortunately these files that they use are different almost every place. And it's not that they're intentionally trying to obfuscate, but it seems that way. So it's a little bit of work to configure it. But once we get it configured, we can go through essentially, like in San Francisco, they have 500,000 ballots in the last election. It took about 20 minutes for our system to actually extract them all. And then we can compare, and that's because in the cloud, which we're using the cloud facilities, we can use up to 1,000 computers at a time to do this in parallel and quickly. So
that is amazing. And that's because San Francisco puts its digital ballot images online, right?
Yeah, this is what we're hoping that they will all
Okay.
do, but of course there's been some resistance to providing these digital ballot images.
So this is very important for people to know that in order to use Audit Engine, there's a few things that have to be in place. You have to get the digital ballot images. Often that takes a public records request. Some states like New York, they are not giving us the digital ballot images. They're saying that, the courts have said that we can't have them, but many states are, you can get those digital ballot images, and some places like Dane County, Wisconsin, and San Francisco are actually, the election officials are putting those digital ballot images up online. If you're not sure what digital ballot images are, go back to one of our earlier broadcasts and we cover what digital ballot images are. I know that Emily Levy talked about it. So we have to wrap up here, but we want to have an hour-long breakout session with you. This is an amazing resource. You're going to be doing this now in the 2020 election, right?
Yeah, to selected, like randomly selected counties that have the ballot images and that we can access them. And also, I want to assert also that we need to provide that oversight to their conventional audits. The audits are no good if they just go back into a back room, come out and say everything is fine. We have to have people watching every step of the way. And a lot of these risk limiting audits, they don't provide the public the ability to watch some key parts, such as pulling the ballots out. And if I don't see them pulling the ballot out, I'm a little bit suspicious that maybe they're pulling just the ballots that they want out and not the random one.
And we have to be suspicious. It's not that, it's not that we don't believe that there are good people who are running our elections, but we have to, it's the trust but verify. We have to make sure these things have to be transparent and they have to be public. And one of the other things is that the cast vote record has to be public. That document that I showed you in Colorado, I don't think they're making their cast vote record public yet, which is another issue. So in order for risk limiting audits to really work, all of the different components of the risk limiting audit have to be public. So what we brought you tonight is 3 different options. You've got your full hand count audits. Those are still using scanners. So we're still using computers to get that quick first result, but then the ballots are counted in public for the most part, maybe up to 75%, or most of the ballots counted by hand. That was what Virginia talked about. Then we had risk limiting, Stephanie spoke to us about, and now we have this independent audit engine from Ray Lutz at Citizens Oversight Project. So that's something that the public can use to audit the auditors. So it's very exciting. And we wanted to have a breakout with you next week. We were saying either Thursday or Friday at 7 p.m. Do you know which one you're good for? Sorry to put you on the
either one.
Either one. Let's do Friday.
Okay.
So we'll do Friday at 7 p.m. with you, and we'll do Monday at 7 p.m. with Virginia. So if you guys want to do those breakout groups, Monday 7 p.m. we'll do full hand count audit breakout with Virginia, and we will send the links. Get on our email list. Go to smartelections.us and sign up. I'm going to say goodnight to you, Ray, and I'm going to sign off here. Thank you so much for being with us. And if people want to contact you, can they contact you through Citizens Project, Citizens Oversight Projects?
Citizensoversight.org is the website, and there's contact information there.
Make sure we have that banner here.
That's
Here we go, citizensoversight.org, and they can contact you through that website?
Yeah.
Okay, super. Thank you so much for being with us. Okay, so that is all we have time for. We're 4 minutes over. I'm really sorry, but we had so much. And then I know I didn't take any questions today. I'm really sorry. But we're going to have those breakout groups, and we're going to try to add in a breakout group for risk limiting audits also. So please make sure that you sign up for next week. Next week, we're having the breakout sessions. And then the week after that, in 2 weeks, on October 6th, that's when we're going to have our next forum. So if you go to smartelections.us, then you can just sign up for our forum there. And every 2 weeks, we need you back. This is all about building momentum, building a movement. We have to do this together. It is not going to happen overnight, but we are going to change our elections. We are going to have accurate, verifiable, secure, accessible, transparent elections. We deserve them, and you're going to be part of it. So join us back here in 2 weeks. Make sure to tell all of your friends. Last time, everybody did a fantastic job. You guys are the PR machine, so not me. I'm trying to get this research for you, but you have to be the PR machine. You can find us now on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Find us, spread our messages, tell your friends, bring your family. Especially if you're involved in a voting rights group or a group for disability advocacy or a group that's working on the electoral college or a group that's working on ranked choice voting, understand that this work, the security of our elections, is fundamental to any of those other transformative processes. So get your group involved, co-sponsor our series, bring your friends and send our information out and we need to get everybody into one big election reform movement. That is how we are going to make these changes. So thank you so much for being here. It's so great to have everybody on board. And we will see you next week at the breakout sessions and in 2 weeks back here for our next forum. Thanks so much.